Right, but they're not going to do that. And with Noelle Quinn, as you mentioned, no challenge.
Clark.
Welcome back to Clark USA fans. Imagine stepping into a packed basketball arena where the energy is supposed to be electric, but instead, something feels off. The crowd is quiet, too quiet. Not because nothing is happening, but because everyone is confused. Stunned. Watching one of the most talented rosters ever assembled in women's basketball struggle to find any kind of rhythm. On the court, you've got elite names. Superstars. Players who dominate headlines and highlight reels. Athletes like Paige Buchers, Chelsea Gray, and Kelsey Plum, players who, on any given night, can take over a game without warning. And yet, here they are, stuck. Possession after possession slipping away, with no flow, no pace, no spark. Across from them stands Italy, not necessarily the favorite, not the more talented side, but tonight, they don't need to be. Because they are disciplined. They are composed. And most importantly, they are patient. They sit back defensively, not overcommitting, not panicking, simply waiting for mistakes. And Team USA keeps giving them exactly what they want. The offense becomes predictable. The ball moves up the floor slowly, swings to the wing, gets dumped into the post, and then nothing. It stalls. It dies. Players hesitate. No one attacks. No one forces the defense to react. It's as if everyone is waiting for someone else to make the first move, and that moment never comes. And just like that, a game that should have been a statement starts to look like a struggle. Now here's the real question. Can you match Caitlin Clark play for play? Before we go further, think about it. Which team was actually struggling before she entered the game? Was it Italy? Spain? France? Or was it Team USA? If you guessed Team USA, you were absolutely right. Because everything you're about to see changes the moment one player steps onto the floor. No dramatic entrance. No loud announcement. Just a quiet substitution, almost easy to miss if you're not paying attention. But from that exact moment, everything shifts. Caitlin Clark checks in. And what happens next isn't luck. It isn't hype. It isn't some scripted sports narrative. It's pure basketball intelligence operating at a level faster than everyone else on the court. The very first thing she does? She pushes the pace. No hesitation. No waiting for a half-court set to develop. The second she touches the ball, she's already reading the defense. She sees where the gaps are forming before they fully open. She understands where her teammates are going to be before they even get there. Suddenly, the tempo changes. Italy, which had been comfortable all game, is now forced to react instead of control. They're running back, scrambling to get set. Their rotations come a split second late, and at this level, a split second is everything. Clark isn't just playing the game, she's speeding it up. The passes become sharper. The movement becomes purposeful. Teammates who were standing still moments ago are now cutting, relocating, finding space. The offense begins to breathe again. And then comes the moment that flips everything completely. Clark pulls up from way beyond the arc. Not just a normal three-point shot. Not even a deep one. We're talking logo range. And she drains it. Clean. No hesitation. No doubt. Now here's what makes that shot different. It's not just the points on the board, it's what it does to the defense. Because now Italy has a problem they didn't have before. You can't sag off her anymore. You can't give her space, not even a little. Because if she sees daylight from 30 feet, she's taking that shot, and she's making you pay for it.
Here comes Sabali. Clark.
So what happens? The defense stretches. And the moment it stretches, everything behind it breaks open. Driving lanes appear. Passing angles widen. The pick and roll suddenly becomes lethal. Cutters start slipping through gaps that didn't exist before. Shooters find themselves open with time, with rhythm, with confidence. This isn't just scoring. This is control. This is one player completely reshaping the geometry of the game. And that's the part people often miss when they look at the stat sheet. Because yes, Clark finishes with solid numbers. Points. Assists. Efficient minutes off the bench. But the real story? It's much bigger than that. Because not every impact shows up in the box score. The pass that leads to the assist doesn't count. The drive that pulls two defenders and creates an open shot one pass later doesn't count. The read that shifts the entire defense just enough to create an opportunity on the next possession doesn't count. But it all matters. And anyone watching that game could feel it. Every time Team USA started to slow down again, every time the rhythm faded, it was Clark who brought it back. Not always with a highlight play. Not always with a big shot. Sometimes it was just a quick decision. A push in transition. A perfectly timed pass. A calm reset that turned chaos into control. She didn't just create moments. She created momentum. And that momentum never stayed gone for long when she was on the floor. Now let's talk about something that turns this from a feeling into a fact. The numbers. Because when you look at the plus-minus statistic from that game, it tells a story that's impossible to ignore. While Caitlin Clark was on the court, Team USA outscored Italy by 27 points. Think about that. Plus 27. In just 22 minutes. Coming off the bench. Not as the primary starter. Not playing the entire game. Not dominating the ball from the opening tip. And yet, the impact was undeniable. Now compare that to what happened when she sat down. The rest of the team, still filled with elite talent, managed a significantly smaller margin. In fact, the difference was about 11 points less dominant without her. Let that sink in. This isn't about individual scoring totals. This is about how the entire team performs when she's on the floor versus when she's not. Every possession, every stop, every bucket, from the moment she checks in to the moment she checks out. That's what plus-minus captures. And in this game, it revealed something very clear. Caitlin Clark wasn't just contributing. She was elevating everyone around her. She was the catalyst, the difference maker. The player who turned a slow, predictable offense into a fast, unpredictable, unstoppable force. And against a disciplined team like Italy, one that had been controlling the pace and staying competitive, that kind of shift doesn't just happen by accident. It happens when a player sees the game differently, processes it faster, executes it better. So this wasn't just a win. It wasn't just a dominant scoreline. It was a statement. A moment in the tournament where everything changed, where one player stepped in and redefined how the game was being played. And if you were watching closely, you didn't just see it, you felt it.
Transition. Oh, that's not gonna waste much time.
Now let's take this story to another level, because what happened on that court wasn't just something fans noticed, it was something analysts, experts, and even critics couldn't ignore. One analyst watching the game live said something that perfectly captured the moment. No hesitation, no overthinking, just a blunt, honest reaction. Team USA is a million times better with Caitlin Clark on the floor. Now normally, a statement like that might sound exaggerated. It might sound like hype or bias or just another hot take thrown into the chaos of sports debates. But this time, it wasn't opinion. It was reality unfolding right in front of everyone's eyes. Because if you go back and really watch how the game developed, the difference is impossible to miss. In the beginning, Italy was comfortable, completely in control of their defensive structure. They were switching screens calmly, staying locked onto shooters, and letting Team USA fall into slow, predictable half-court sets that went nowhere. There was no urgency required from them because nothing on the offensive end was forcing them to react. They weren't scrambling. They weren't stressed. They were simply waiting. And Team USA kept playing right into that. But the second Caitlin Clark stepped onto the floor, that comfort disappeared. Instantly, Italy's entire defensive mindset had to change. Because now they weren't just guarding a team. They were guarding a problem they couldn't ignore. Clark had already shown she could pull up from well beyond the three-point line and not just attempt it, but make it with confidence. That one deep shot alone forced Italy to rethink everything. Suddenly, giving her space, even a few feet beyond the arc, was no longer an option. So they extended. They pushed their defense out further than they had all game. And that single adjustment created a chain reaction. Driving lanes opened up for Kalia Copper, allowing her to attack downhill with speed and purpose. Kelsey Plum began finding clean catch-and-shoot opportunities instead of contested looks. Paige Bucher started seeing cutting angles that simply did not exist earlier in the game. All of this, from one player being on the floor. And here's the key point. Clark didn't need to score every possession to take over the game. She didn't need to dominate the ball for 40 minutes. She just needed to exist within the offense, and the defense had no choice but to respect her. That respect created space. That space created opportunities. And those opportunities turned into domination. That's what a plus 27 plus minus in just 22 minutes actually looks like when you break it down beyond the surface. But here's where the conversation gets even more serious. Because the Italy game? That's not even the full story. If you zoom out and look at the entire FIBA 2026 qualifying tournament, the numbers don't just support Clark's impact, they amplify it. Across multiple games, different opponents, and completely different defensive systems, Caitlin Clark consistently stands out. She leads Team USA in assists. She's tied for the lead in scoring. She leads in free throws. And most importantly, she has the highest plus-minus on the entire roster. Not second. Not close. First. That means one thing, and one thing only. Team USA performs better, significantly better, when Caitlin Clark is on the floor compared to when anyone else is. And remember who we're talking about here. This isn't an average roster. This is a team filled with elite talent. A reigning WNBA champion like Chelsea Gray. A proven all-star like Kalia Copper. A generational rookie talent like Paige Buchers. Every single one of them is capable of taking over a game. And yet, the data still points in one direction. The team is at its best when Clark is running it. That's not narrative. That's not hype. That's consistency across games. Different defenses. Different matchups. Different coaching strategies. It's a pattern. And patterns don't lie. But it doesn't stop there. Because when you expand the lens even further, beyond Team USA, beyond individual rosters, and look at the entire tournament field, something even more incredible appears. Caitlin Clark doesn't just lead her team in plus-minus. She leads everyone. Every player. Every country. Spain, Australia, France, Canada, every roster, every star, every system. She's at the top. The most impactful player in the entire tournament is coming off the bench. Let that sink in. A player whose minutes have been debated, analyzed, questioned by coaches, media, and fans alike, is statistically outperforming every single player on the international stage. There's no angle you can twist that into. No argument that can fully dismiss it. The numbers are clear. And then comes the part that feels almost unreal. The assist record. Because this isn't just impressive, it's historic. Through just 3 games, Caitlin Clark recorded 19 assists.
A little bit earlier, I asked Diana, what was your playing weight that you...
That alone would be notable. But here's what makes it extraordinary. She broke the all-time record for most assists in a single FIBA qualifying tournament in history. And she did it with games still left to play. Think about that. She didn't just break the record. She shattered it early, while playing fewer minutes than most of her teammates. While coming off the bench, while still being part of a rotation that limited her time on the court. So let's lay it all out clearly. She leads Team USA in assists. She's tied for first in scoring. She leads in free throws. She has the highest plus-minus on the team. She has the highest plus-minus in the entire tournament. And she holds the all-time assist record for a FIBA qualifying tournament. All of this, without starting a single game. At that point, the debate starts to disappear. Because if someone still wants to argue that another player is more impactful, more important, or more valuable to this team, they have to argue against every number, every result, and every on-court moment we've just seen. And that's a very difficult case to make. This is exactly why Caitlin Clark is already being talked about as one of the greatest to ever play the game. Not just because of highlights. Not just because of popularity. But because of impact. Real, measurable, undeniable impact. And right now, there isn't a strong argument left against it. But while all of this was happening on the court, something else was unfolding behind the scenes, something that made the situation even more interesting, and, honestly, a bit uncomfortable if you were paying close attention. The coaching situation. Because between the Puerto Rico game and the Italy game, something changed. And it wasn't a small adjustment. It was a noticeable shift. Nate Tibbetts stepped in to run the bench during the Italy game, while Kara Lawson, who had been in that role previously, was no longer there in the same capacity. And here's the part that raised eyebrows. No clear explanation was given. No detailed reasoning. Just silence. And in sports, sometimes silence says more than words ever could. To understand why this mattered, you have to go back to what happened earlier. After Clark's record-breaking debut, where she delivered one of the most efficient and impactful performances ever by a bench player, Kara Lawson made a comment that immediately caught attention. She emphasized that everyone needs to shine, not just Caitlin Clark. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. Basketball is a team sport. Balance matters. But in that specific moment, with Clark clearly driving the offense and producing results, the comment didn't land the way it was intended. Fans questioned it. Media picked it apart. Because it felt like the impact of one player was being downplayed, despite the evidence being right there on the court. Then came the Puerto Rico game. And that's where things became even more complicated. Puerto Rico implemented a box-and-one defense, specifically designed to neutralize one player. That player? Caitlin Clark. Now here's where strategy matters. When a defense commits that heavily to stopping one player, it creates natural weaknesses elsewhere on the floor. Gaps, open spaces, opportunities. But instead of adjusting to exploit those gaps, the offense shifted away from Clark. She was positioned off the ball, kept on the perimeter, while other players were asked to initiate. The result? The game slowed down. The spacing collapsed. The flow disappeared. Even Clark herself described the performance as clunky. And, honestly, that might have been putting it lightly. Yes, Team USA still won. But it didn't look right. It felt forced. Like a team trying to function without using its most effective tool. The reaction was immediate. Fans were frustrated. Analysts were confused. Questions started circulating everywhere. Was Clark being limited intentionally? Or was the coaching staff simply not maximizing what was clearly working? Neither answer looked good. And then came the Italy game. Almost like a real-time experiment. Nate Tibbetts takes over. Clark steps into a true point guard role. The offense is built around her decision-making instead of being restricted by it. She's given freedom, control, trust. And what happens? Everything works again. The pace returns. The spacing improves. The ball movement becomes fluid. The offense doesn't just function. It dominates. Tibbetts even confirmed after the game that he intentionally allowed longer stretches and more creative freedom to build chemistry and let players play naturally. And the result? A completely different team. A team that looked alive, confident, dangerous. All because one key decision was made: let Caitlin Clark be Caitlin Clark.
First lead for the Liberty that didn't.
What we witnessed against Italy wasn't just a great performance, it was a complete contrast to everything that came before it. Because if you think back to the Puerto Rico game, the difference is almost impossible to ignore. That version of Team USA looked hesitant, slower, disconnected. The offense didn't flow naturally, it felt forced, like a system trying to function while holding itself back. The ball moved, but without purpose. The spacing existed, but without impact. And most importantly, the team wasn't playing through its most dangerous weapon. But against Italy, everything flipped. And that didn't happen by accident. That was the result of a coaching decision, a deliberate shift based on what the tape clearly showed. A recognition of the obvious truth that had been building across multiple games. Get Caitlin Clark the ball. Let her run the offense. Stop trying to work around your best player and start building around her instead. It sounds simple, almost too simple. But sometimes in high-level basketball, the simplest adjustment is the one that changes everything. Now, whether Kara Lawson was officially replaced in that moment, whether she stepped back voluntarily, or whether this was always part of some pre-planned rotation strategy, that part hasn't been clearly explained. And maybe it never will be. But what cannot be ignored is the timing. Because the timing tells its own story. There was real backlash after the earlier games. Fans weren't just reacting emotionally, they were reacting to what they were seeing on the court. Analysts were breaking it down. Media discussions were getting louder. The results under the previous rotation and offensive structure simply weren't matching the level of talent on the roster. And then suddenly, a different voice on the bench, different decisions being made, different roles being assigned. And immediately, the results change. Team USA doesn't just improve, they dominate. A 34-point victory. A performance that, for the first time in the tournament, made them look like the most dangerous team on the floor. Not just talented, not just capable, but fully unlocked. You can draw your own conclusions from that, because the results are speaking loudly enough on their own. Now, let's shift to something even more important, something that might actually define the future of this team moving forward. Because what happened against Italy wasn't just about one player. It was about a connection. A developing chemistry that could become unstoppable if it continues to grow. Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers. Throughout the game, something subtle but incredibly powerful started to take shape. They began to understand each other. Not just in a basic, surface-level way, but in the way elite players do, where decisions are made almost instantly, without hesitation, without overthinking. They started reading the game at the same speed. And when two players operate like that at the same time, the offense becomes incredibly difficult to defend. Because now it's not just about reacting to one playmaker. It's about reacting to multiple minds working in sync. Coach Tibbetts recognized this immediately, and instead of limiting it, he leaned into it. Hard. He deployed a three-guard lineup featuring Clark, Bueckers, and Kelsey Plum all on the floor together. And that lineup created chaos for Italy's defense. Because suddenly, there was no clear answer. Who do you guard tightly? Who do you help off of? Who do you prioritize? Every single player in that lineup can push the pace. Every single player can make quick, high-level decisions. Every single player can create opportunities not just for themselves, but for everyone else on the court. And that's where things become overwhelming for a defense. Because by the time Italy tried to decide who the biggest threat was, the ball had already moved. The advantage had already shifted. The opportunity had already been created. That's what happens when you put multiple high IQ guards together and let them play freely. The defense runs out of answers. And more importantly, they run out of time. Now, contrast that with how other players were used in this game. Take Angel Reese, for example. Under Tibbetts, her role changed significantly. She played fewer minutes than she had in previous games. The ball-handling responsibilities she briefly had against Puerto Rico were completely removed. The offense wasn't running through her, it was flowing through the backcourt. And this isn't about criticizing Reese as a player. It's about understanding where the offense is most effective. Because the Italy game answered that question very clearly. When you have the option to run your offense through fast, dynamic guard play, through players like Clark and Bueckers who can read, react, and create at elite speed, you take it. You lean into it. You build around it.
Great job reading the defense. Her hands were...
Because slowing the game down, forcing it into a different structure, or trying to balance touches at the cost of efficiency, that limits what the team can actually become. And against Italy, we saw what happens when that limitation is removed. The game speeds up. The decisions become sharper. The execution becomes cleaner. And the results? They speak for themselves. What makes this even more exciting, and honestly a little bit scary for every other team in the tournament, is that this connection is still developing. Clark and Bueckers still have more games to build on this chemistry. And already, the improvement is visible. The passes are becoming more precise. The timing is becoming more natural. The reads are becoming more instinctive. Clark is finding Bueckers in spots where the defense has no good answer. If a defender helps off Clark, Bueckers is open. If they stay glued to Bueckers, Clark pulls up from deep without hesitation. And at that point, the defense is stuck in a no-win situation. That three-guard lineup, with Clark orchestrating everything, isn't just entertaining basketball. It's a functional system. A blueprint for what this offense can look like at its peak. Every piece in the right place. Every decision made at the right speed. Every player contributing in a way that amplifies the others. And here's where the story goes beyond this tournament. Because none of what Caitlin Clark is doing right now stays here. All of it comes back with her. Back to Indiana. Back to the WNBA. Think about what she's accomplished in just a few games. She broke the all-time assist record for a FIBA qualifying tournament. She leads every player in plus-minus across the entire field. She leads her team in assists. She's tied for the lead in scoring. She leads in free throws. And the team performs significantly better when she's on the floor. All of that while coming off the bench. And this didn't come out of nowhere. Her debut alone was historic. 17 points, 12 assists, in just 19 minutes. Multiple records broken in a single game, including the most assists ever by a bench player in FIBA history. That's not a hot streak. That's not temporary form. That's a player operating at a level that forces the game to adjust to her. So, what does this mean for Indiana moving forward? It means everything. Because the system that just dismantled Italy, a fast-paced, guard-heavy, read-and-react offense, is something Clark can bring directly into the WNBA. And that kind of international experience? It sharpens a player in ways regular season games simply cannot. The pace, the pressure, the adjustments, the global competition. All of it adds layers to her game. And when you combine that with an entire off-season to build, train, and develop, you're not getting the same player next season. You're getting a better one, a faster one, a smarter one. The reads will be quicker. The decisions will be cleaner. And the confidence? That's the part that changes everything. Because confidence built on breaking records, leading teams, and dominating international competition doesn't disappear. It stays. It becomes part of who you are. At the end of the day, the scoreboard tells one version of the story. A dominant win. A wide margin. A successful performance. But the real story? It goes much deeper. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just play in this tournament. She changed it. She turned hesitation into rhythm. She turned uncertainty into control. She turned potential into production. And what we saw against Italy might just be the beginning. There are still games left. Still opportunities for this team to grow. Still moments where this system can evolve even further. And the question now isn't whether Team USA can win. The question is, how far can they go when everything is finally clicking? Because once the rest of the world fully realizes just how dangerous this offense has become, it might already be too late. This isn't just a basketball story anymore. It's about transformation. It's about timing. And it's about a player who refuses to be ignored. And the truth is, we're only getting started.